get started. Yeah, so good afternoon, and I'm very happy to see you all today. And today our seminar is on hints and tips on Ielts preparation, and we have a fantastic guest speaker. So this is Alex Walls. Yeah. So Alex has profound, great experience in exam preparation, in teaching lexically, and also in teacher training and being a fantastic academic manager. So, Alex, it's over to you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Galina, and of course, thank you for the invitation to come and speak today. It's always a pleasure to do these kinds of things. So I am going to ask for a little bit of participation from people today. If you can type answers into the chat box, that would be fantastic. So first of all, I'm just interested to know where everybody is coming from today. I imagine many people are joining us from Moscow, but maybe some people are joining from elsewhere. So please feel free to say hello in the chat box and let us know where you're joining from. Yeah, my name is Alex. I'm Director of Studies at Windsor here in Moscow, still here now. And I have been teaching Ielts for quite a while, since 2013. And I've prepared, probably hundreds, if not thousands of students, probably hundreds is fairer to say, actually, in that time, many of which have told me they've gone on to get very good results. And I am very passionate about the lexical approach as well. So this is really bringing together these two things that I do, preparing students for Ielts and teaching lexically. So let's get into it. So first of all, I've got a picture of someone you might recognize. So first of all, do we know who this is? Can we just type in the chat if you know? I'm sure you do. Oh, of course, yes, it is Greta Thunberg. So I want to do a little bit of a survey here. I want to know how you feel about this person. Are your feelings towards this person mostly positive or mostly negative? I have a theory about how the answers are going to come out, but I'm intrigued to see how they do. Okay, we've got one mixed. Okay. Interesting. Okay, wow. Okay, all right. That's actually different towards that's actually different from what I thought would happen, but okay, interesting. Well, I am a fan of Greta Thunberg because at 16, she's actually older than that now, of course, but 16 is when she really came to prominence. She had something that I really didn't have when I was 16, or a number of things that she had, actually. So she had an opinion about something. She had a passion, and she had some ideas about what the world should be doing about it. Although this is one of the things that she is criticized for. She mostly says, we need to do something, but perhaps the ideas are not as concrete as people would like. But I think given the fact that she's 16, or she was 16, I think perhaps people can give her a little bit of leeway about that. What I think she was really doing is really being very passionate about an issue that she felt strongly about. And I'm not trying to get you to like her or anything like that. I'm just saying that at 16, this certainly wasn't me. And And I find when I'm preparing people for IELTS, I often get a lot of 16 to 17-year-olds. Not just for IELTS, for other international exams as well. I'm preparing a 16-year-old at the moment for CAE. And I've had other young people for TOEFL and other exams. And the thing is that IELTS asks them to tackle such problems as world hunger, traffic congestion, climate change, possibly can come up, poverty. I've seen all of these as IELTS essay tasks. And I think the thing is that these are problems that adults haven't been able to solve. You know, these aren't new problems. And they're problems that have all been around for a while. And clearly, if adults were able to solve them, you know, they might be solved by now. So, you know, what chance does a 16 to 17-year-old have of solving these problems? Probably very little. Now, you know, we might argue that in an English exam, we're not supposed to be judging students on their ability to solve these world problems. We're only supposed to be judging them on their English. As I say, not the content of their answer. But the problem is that if you don't really have any idea about this topic, what on earth are you even supposed to say about it? If you can't think up ideas, then you're not really going to be able to write anything for the examiner to judge you on. So that's very much a problem. So, you know, I'm sure if Greta Thunberg took the IELTS exam and she had a question on climate change, I'm pretty confident she would do very well. She might not do so well if she got one of the questions about global poverty or traffic congestion or something like that. So my solution to this then is what I call lexical frameworks, which is something I've named. I don't know if anyone else has ever named anything within our field, lexical frameworks, but it's the name that I've chosen for the way that I approach this issue. So what I really mean by this is when we're selecting lexical chunks to teach, what I'm looking for is a range of lexical chunks that indicate a thought pattern. And by doing that, they are generative in terms of ideas. And if they're generative in terms of ideas, then hopefully they're generative in terms of language as well. So, I mean, I feel that course books often fall a little bit short here, because what I find they do in terms of the lexical approach, or even in a non-lexical approach, they focus on content words that students might need. And if you're lucky, you might get some collocations that are made from these as well. So, you know, you'll often find these in IELTS books, increasing dramatically, global warming, and to propose a solution. But the issue then is that I find students just obviously drop these into structures that they already know, which doesn't greatly improve their actual overall response. So they're not providing students with everything that they need here. So what you get is still kind of poor responses made from these, like computers have increased dramatically in our lives, which I'm not even sure necessarily what we mean by that. Do we mean the number of computers have increased dramatically, or that they've somehow increased something within our lives? Global warming is bad. I mean, yeah, I think we might all agree on that, but it's not a particularly great sentence. Or I want to propose a solution. Well, this is the kind of empty language. It's just empty words in an IELTS essay. Get on and propose the solution. So what we're going to look at now is some different ways or different chunks I've thought of that indicate these kind of thought patterns. And we'll see how that might lead from a poorer response into hopefully a better response. So yeah, so these frameworks will hopefully help students to push their answers further by focusing on things like being more precise about what they mean, providing more detail to what they mean, and ultimately creating complex sentences. So if we're just teaching them chunks that are based around nouns, they might be able to drop those into simple sentences, but one thing they need to produce to get the higher marks in Ielts is going to be complex sentences, complex structures. So let's start then with how do we introduce a topic in an Ielts essay. Most of my examples are going to be from writing here, although they could be tweaked for speaking as well. So we've got this Ielts writing question. It's much easier to learn in a small class than in a larger one. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So a poor response, the kind of thing that I might see all the time, is people jump straight in with smaller classes are better than larger classes. And we're missing quite a few bits of information here. First of all, why are they? Better for who? Better for the teacher, better for the students. Who exactly? Better for all students? Does it depend on what they're studying? Better in what way? I actually tell students to try and avoid the word better and words like good generally. I think there's always a more specific word. If you said that, a food is good, borscht is good. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean it's tasty? It's good value for money? What exactly? And ultimately, who cares? This is the first question that we generally want to answer when we're writing an Ielts essay anyway, is who cares about this topic? So the way I always approach such an essay then is, firstly, I want them to state why the topic is important. And I think also if you were responding to a speaking question, this isn't a bad thing to do either. So we might start by thinking then, first of all, which people care about education. And I'm going to invite you to type in the chat box which people do care about education. Do we care about education? I hope so, because presumably we're all teachers. So I hope we care about education at least. So yeah, teachers care. Anybody else care? Parents, good. Okay, officials. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what we mean by officials, but okay. High school, okay, so younger children probably don't actually care about their education all that much. The authorities, yeah. Okay, there is one group that we haven't mentioned, which I think do care a lot about education, which is employers. Ultimately, we get education partly because the government wants us to get education, but also, employers are very interested in the education that people are getting because they're going to be the employees of the future. And so society as just a general kind of word are also very important, very interested in what happens in education, because if we want a better society, we probably need better educated people. So why do we care? Well, there's a number of reasons why we might care. Students might care because there is more choice nowadays. So we have to be more discerning in terms of the choices we make. Education is a large expense, when people pay thousands of pounds to go to university. It improves our employment options. So, obviously we want to have the best possible choices there. There's more competition for jobs nowadays. And, society cares because, as I say, it creates a better functioning society. So this is the thing I want students to think about before they start jumping into the topic. So then I want them to state why the topic is important. So we might use some chunks like these. Nowadays is the most kind of cliche word for answering an Ielts question. It's how so many of them start nowadays. I try and encourage students to actually get away from that word if they can. So I think we can use something like, over the past 50 years, for example, or, the more something, the more something. So the more educated society is, the more we can talk about the amount of time or money that's invested in our education, or how decisions about education impact some other area of our lives, most likely employment. So then we can end up with a better response like this. Over the past 50 years, the employment market for graduates has become increasingly competitive. And then we can go on to say a bit more here. As a result, students seek out optimal learning conditions in their university studies. So I hope we can agree that this would be a much better response than someone saying smaller classes are better than larger classes. So the next one is about causation. So seeing the link between things. So another part, task 2, writing essay. We've just got the first half of it here, actually. Every year, millions of people around the world suffer from poor health as a result of air pollution. What do you think are the causes of this? So again, students might jump in with something like, there are too many cars on the road, and so people get sick from the fumes. Well, again, I have some issues with this. Firstly, we've got two simple sentences, so it would be better if we could join them in some way. And also, perhaps I'm nitpicking here, but the implication is potentially that exhaust fumes only cause sickness if there are a lot of cars. That if there were less cars on the road, the fumes wouldn't cause sickness, but presumably exhaust fumes cause sickness regardless of how many cars there are on the road. It's just the percentage of, or the number of people that are actually being affected by that is actually changing. So this is what we're really talking about being precise, which is an important criteria for the higher bands in Ielts. So what we want to do is we want to state the cause and effect. So we need chunks which help students to do this. So we can start with the cause, and we might find such phrases as, one of the major contributors to the issue is this thing. A large proportion of, again, the issue is caused by, and then the cause, because we need to give at least 2 causes. Then we might use something like a secondary factor is, and then we need to link the effect to that. So we can use words, of course, like consequently, or this leads to, and hopefully this leads to a better response like this. So a large proportion of air pollution is caused by the rise in car ownership. This leads to people being more exposed to dangerous chemicals in their emissions, which is much more precise. Obviously, yeah, the vocabulary being used is much better as well. But just the structure of this is a lot better. This leads to is often going to then involve some kind of clause that that would imply a complex structure here. So we've got this participle clause of being more exposed in here, making this more complex. We also need to give solutions. So again, taking the same essay question and just looking at the other half of it, which is the solutions to this issue of more poor health resulting from air pollution. So, you know, the kind of solution I often see in people's essays before I've actually taught them how to answer this one is something along the lines of people need to own fewer cars or drive less. And I mean, yeah, that might solve the problem, but it doesn't answer, you know, these things. How do you make this happen, and how does it actually help? We shouldn't assume that the examiner is going to, you know, just make the logical link of, well, yeah, less cars, less emissions. We should tell students to state this fact for the examiner. So for this one, I actually have a system of coming up with solutions for just about any problem. I think there are 3 types of solution that fit absolutely anything. So you have legal solutions, you have financial solutions, and you have educational solutions. So for legal solutions, these are ones that are fixed by the government passing some kind of law. And there are actually 4 types of law that the government can pass. And probably it's the first 3 that I've got here that are going to be most relevant in most situations. So first of all, I give students the you know, pass, enact legislation if we're talking about bringing new legislation in, or if you want to change or remove legislation, then the correct words to use are to repeal or to amend. Then the 4 things that a law can do is either to prohibit, to restrict, to obligate, or to enable. And so by giving them it in this kind of chart, this is actually creating the complex structure for the student. All they need to do is select which of these 4 and put it after to pass or enact legislation. So obviously, yeah, we could do different things. We could prohibit the sale of cars. That would certainly get rid of all of the emissions, probably a bit extreme. So we might want to restrict the age at which people can drive, which would limit the number of cars on the road and probably be less extreme. We could obligate people to have something fitted to their cars that reduces the emissions. Enable it's more difficult to use this one, but there might be cases where by enabling schools to do something or enabling manufacturers to do something, you know, this might actually provide some kind of solution. So I generally focus more on the prohibiting, restricting, and obligating. Then we have financial solutions, and there are a number of financial controls that can be used to create change. You could argue that these are in fact legal solutions because it's the government that you know, change these often by introducing some kind of legislation. However, I think it helps to think about them separately. So of course they can tax something that they don't want to happen, or increase the taxes on something that they don't want to happen, or decrease taxes on things they do want to happen. They can provide and offer loans or grants, subsidies, and scholarships, particularly for things like education, or you know, if you're trying to tackle climate change, maybe to provide subsidies for things like solar panels and things like that. We can subsidize the cost of, so just using subsidy in a different form. And for international issues, we might the solution might involve providing some kind of international aid, which could be money, or could be experts and help and assistance in setting things up in other countries. And then finally, as I say, there are educational solutions. So it might be that we need to raise awareness of something. Certainly, I think Greta Thunberg, as we saw earlier on, has done a job of raising awareness among people about climate change. We might need to remove some kind of stigma associated with something. And the example I usually give for this one is I have a friend, a male friend, who went into nursing, and this is a job that often people associate with women. So if we want more male nurses, we might need to remove the stigma that's associated with men going into nursing. And similarly, if we want to introduce, to increase the number of women in STEM fields and things like that, then again, we might need to remove some stigma that's attached to that. Or just promoting the benefits of something as well. So if students pick some of these solutions, then we end up with a better response like this. The government could reduce the number of cars on the road by passing legislation restricting the age at which people are allowed to drive. The student here hasn't said that they should do this. He said that they could do this. So he's still being fairly non-committal in terms of how strongly he feels about this solution. But he's offering a possibility, and it's very well worded. This is the point that we want to get students to. So then we also have agreement. We're often asking students whether they agree with something or not. So again, we've got one of the questions from earlier on. Is it much easier to learn in a small class? Sorry, it is much easier to learn in a small class than a larger one. To what extent do you agree or disagree? And I've seen this written quite a lot. I agree that it is easier to learn in a small class. I actually, when I talk to students about such sentences as this one, I often use the phrase paraphrasing, because what they've essentially done is just parroted back the question rather than changing the words and the form that's used. But the other thing is, again, there's no why. And when you actually read this in an essay, there isn't, the question isn't actually there. So, you end up thinking, well, who are you actually agreeing with? Do you even know who you're agreeing with? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense when it's kind of, the context becomes detached from it, actually. So what I encourage students to do instead is to make a thesis and add an outline statement to it. I see we've got somebody has paraphrased. A small class is believed to be better than. Okay. I still might ask who believes this. So the thesis is going to be to state that one of them is better generally, or you could possibly state that it doesn't actually matter, but probably we're going to come down on one side or the other. And I generally do actually encourage students to do that in a agree-disagree essay, because I think it makes for a better piece of writing. I think sitting on the fence is not something to do in an exam, to be honest. Better to play devil's advocate. So we want to state one of them is better, and we want to just state briefly 2 reasons why that one is better than the other. This is going to form our outline. Basically, in other words, in the 2 paragraphs that follow, these are going to be our topic ideas. So when we want to state that something is better, as I say, there's always a better word than better. There's always a more specific word. So we've got easier or effective, Yulia is offering in the chat. Let's see what I came up with. So one way that something can be better than another is often cheaper, although cheaper doesn't necessarily always mean better, but it is potentially something better for somebody. More cost effective is perhaps what we really mean when we are talking about things being cheaper, when we want to say that they're better. More conducive to learning. I think this is the one that we really want to talk about when we're talking about small classes or big classes. More widely available. That could be another reason why something might be better. If something's not available to you, it's not really a choice. We've got more suggestions now, more efficient, more practical. Students are profoundly involved. Okay, so I think I would say more involving or more engaging. And we want to give 2 reasons, as I say. So first, we need to link these reasons. So we're going to use some linking words. It's always a good opportunity to go through some of those with students. Obviously, they're going to have different grammar patterns that follow. And then we want to give our reasons. So we might use such chunks as these. It allows for, it enables, owing to increased opportunities for, the reduced chance that, or the potential for something to happen. And then hopefully we end up with some sentences more like this. So smaller classes are more conducive to learning since they allow more opportunity for individual feedback and personalized tasks. As I say, we only want a very kind of brief teaser of what these 2 arguments are going to be. We don't want the full argument. We just want, you know, there's more opportunity for this, or it allows this. We're going to expand on what these things actually mean later. But we've got a very nice sentence there. It's complex. And yeah, it really, I think, answers the question. It gives a thesis. It gives the opinion. So the examiner is in no doubt that the opinion has been covered. Okay, so we also need to give opinions from time to time, and here I'm talking about other people's opinions. So we've got another question. Some people think that multiple choice tests are better than tests which require you to write an essay. Other people think that tests which require you to write an essay are better. Discuss both views and give your opinion. So because we're dealing with this some people believe, or some people think, we're going to need to tackle that. So the kind of response that I often see when students first start one of my Ielts classes are along the lines of this. Some people say that tests where you guess from several answers are superior to. I mean, the English is fairly okay, but firstly, we've got some awkward paraphrasing because they're trying to paraphrase the word multiple choice test. Okay, I mean, we don't always have to paraphrase everything, and yeah, it's, I don't like it where it ends up with really long subjects. But the actual range of complexity here is actually pretty small because we're just using the same kind of structure effectively. So the are better than kind of mixed. Some people say that bit's certainly the same. So when we're stating other people's opinions, we can use chunks along the lines of, many or few researchers support the view that teachers are generally in favor of, is a commonly held belief, or something has found favor among. So what you'll see in all of these is that, well, most of them actually, we're actually saying who it is that believes this. I think that's an important thing to do. Just leaving it as people, well, okay. The third one, not so much, just as a commonly held belief. It doesn't really answer that question, but we might do this with things that are, okay, clearly more just everybody, not just a particular group. Yeah, I think this is, certainly much stronger than just when students try to replace some people say with some people believe, or a large number of people believe, and they just try and change kind of word by word. We want to give them chunks that will allow them to do this better. So we might end up with a, oh yeah, sorry. And then the other thing that we might want to do once we've said what someone's opinion is to give a concession, or rather to overcome the concession. In fact, the concession is we've stated their opinion and that it exists. We then want to overcome that by saying why their opinion is actually wrong. So we might use something like, however, this doesn't apply to such a situation, or putting both together, although some people think, okay, although it's commonly believed that, it's not always the case when, or this may not be true when, X is true. So we might end up with a better response like this. Many researchers support the view that multiple choice tests do not adequately test knowledge. However, this doesn't take into account the fact that teachers have limited time to mark detailed submissions. I'm sure that's something we can all agree on that point. So perhaps, teachers sometimes like multiple choice tests because they're easy to mark. I think this says it in a much more articulate way, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, and the last framework I've actually got for you today is looking at data literacy, which is something that I find even much older adults can have problems with, actually. Those that are not so mathematically minded, perhaps, might look at such charts as this one and panic a little bit. But I don't think there is a need to panic. I think we can guide students through this. So this is the kind of chart that you might get for an Ielts writing task 1 on the academic paper. So we've got the number of students studying languages at one university. As we can see, there are a number of quite commonly spoken languages. We might just quickly note that French was the most commonly studied at the beginning, although it's dropped to 4th place at the end of the period. We might notice that Spanish has become the most popular, and we might also notice that Polish and Chinese weren't studied originally, but are being studied by the end of the period. So the kind of response I often see with this one is the different languages had different trends. Now, the advice that I'm often giving to students is to imagine that they're writing for a university professor. So imagine the university professor's response. What possible useful information can I actually take from that sentence? It doesn't really tell me anything. They had different trends. Well, I would expect that if we plotted 6 different data series of anything, that it would probably have different trends. If it didn't, I'd wonder why we were doing any kind of survey on it in the first place. So yeah, this is just probably the most useless sentence that I've ever actually really come across. So what we want to do in a task one is we want to move from general information to specific information and then back to general information. And it's these general information parts that I think students have the most difficulty with. It's quite easy to say, you know, there were X number of people doing this in this year. But when it comes to the more general points, and how do we not repeat ourselves in those? So I tell students to focus on two general statements. First of all, we want an overall trend, and then we want to find a key comparison. So the overall trend, which we'll talk about in the introduction, we might do something like this. The number of students studying all languages has greatly increased during this period. Okay, now all we need to do to work out if that's the case is we just need to look at the number of students studying each language, roughly add them up at the beginning and at the end, and work out whether one number is larger than the other. We don't have to be super precise about this. We can round the numbers up as we're kind of calculating them. I certainly don't want students to kind of work out exactly and then add them all together, because that's going to take too much time. The other thing we could do with this particular graph is we could say the number of languages being studied have increased during this period, which we saw. It went from 4 languages in the beginning to 6 languages at the end. And that should be maths that absolutely anybody can do. If you can't do that maths, then I think you've got much bigger problems than actually taking the Ielts exam. So, you know, the question here really, particularly for the first possible answer we can give, is just, has the total number of this thing increased, decreased, or stayed about the same? That's all they really need to say. So if they said the number of students studying languages has stayed roughly the same, that would be absolutely fine. Would you, that first, sorry, the introduction, we just want to know, is there a change or not? And if so, just roughly in what direction? The key comparison is a little bit different. So here, what I want to do is actually look at the individual languages and find at least 2 of them to actually compare. So we could have, while X started the period as the most popular language, popular is usually a word we have to be careful about. It implies the most people like that language, which is not necessarily, you know, the same as people studying that language. So we could change that to as the most studied language, perhaps. So in this case, it would be French. Well, French started the period as the most studied language. By the end of the period, it had been replaced by Y, which I think from memory was Spanish. We might also add another language that also replaced it, particularly if that one was very close to the other one. We might also, you know, just note that one of them remained stable throughout the period, which I think was German. German was fairly stable throughout the period. But really what we're looking for is the big changes here, which ones change the most. And we want to give the students chunks that will allow them to say which one has changed the most. So I think I'm bang on for time here at the moment. So in conclusion, what I really want to say then is that IELTS students need to come up with ideas, and they need to know how to express them. These are the 2 things that we need to help them with. And I think we can do this at the same time by thinking about chunks more as frameworks rather than individual kind of chunks. And we can focus particularly on chunks that are going to help students think up these ideas, show the relationship between ideas, and very importantly, produce grammatically complex and accurate sentences quickly. So, I mean, that really concludes my points. All the questions that I've taken from in this in this presentation have been from this book, The Complete Guide to Ielts. Yeah, if you're interested in finding out more about me, I have all my social media. If you follow that QR link, you'll have all my social media contacts. You can also look at my website. But if you have any questions now, I'll be very delighted to answer them.
Okay, our dear participants seem to be pretty shy to ask you questions right now. But as we see a link to Alex's website, then I guess he will be very enthusiastic to answer all your questions. Yes, so Alex, thank you very much. Really, so it's been very useful, very practical, a lot of practical ideas, really, thanks a lot. Yeah, and really, so when we are preparing students for exams, it's important that they have some frames to rely on, and well, if these frames help them go a little bit further, then it's really fantastic. Yeah, so thank you very much. And so let me please also share my screen with you. So Alex, in his presentation, mentioned some materials that he was using, and I would like to briefly show you something interesting that we have, which can help you prepare your students for the Ielts exam. So first, we have fantastic books by Delta Publishing. So as you can see, so there are some skills books. Yeah, and well, the course book which can help you prepare your students intensively, and also a fantastic series with IELTS games and activities. Then and National Geographic Learning also offers quite a lot of decent books, yeah, including, well, the Complete Guide to IELTS, which Alex mentioned, and IELTS Express. Yeah, as you can see, there is the IELTS Express course book for intermediate students. Well, then also Collins ELT, they have, as you see, a lot of resources. So, and last but not least, publications. And why was I showing you all these books? Because, well, until the end of February, we offer a 30% discount on exam preparation materials. Yes, so, well, it's, I guess, good time for you to buy these books and supplementary materials. Well, and so talking about the future, our plans for the future, and well, schedule of our webinars. In March, there will be two interesting, very interesting webinars. The first one will be well, with the intriguing name, yeah, Make a Splash this summer with Dive In. And we're going to have a guest speaker from Delta Publishing, Michelle Jagger. She's an educational consultant, and she will be talking about well, the ways you can build a short summer course with good, well, decent say materials. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid the word good as Alex recommended. So, and on the 25th of March there will be the seminar on customizing your course, like the ways we can tailor make our course, not just a lesson but the whole curriculum. Well, and also if you have any questions, comments, we will also be more than happy to hear from you. Yeah, so thanks a lot. Enjoy your lessons and see you on the, well, see you in March. Yeah, and well, we will announce all our events also a little bit later. Yes, so thank you and bye.